Hello and welcome to this preview video of WaveCloud. Now WaveCloud is a granular synthesis engine and capable of many different sounds. Many of the presets are very tonal in nature and very usable within a mix. While other presets are quite chaotic in nature but still edging on the musical side, this particular preset is a good example of that. But I'm going to bring up the oscillator ever so slightly so it emphasises the pitch of the note and not the chaos. And while I've tried to keep most of the presets very usable, we still have your typical granular synthesis type atmospheres and noises. And this is an example of one such thing. So it's quite fun to create these ever-evolving atmosphere type sounds using your own samples. And WaveCloud also supports MPE, which means we can have per note, pitch bend and aftertouch, and we also support controller 74, so you can program them up as you wish. So let's find an example of an MPE preset, and I'm going to flick to the MPE keyboard. Although you can use the conventional keyboard, listen out for the feedback on these two notes. I'm just sliding up and down vertically to get the feedback. So I think a good starting place is to take a look at the user interface and what it has to offer. Starting with the Grains tab, we have an oscillator on the far left. This helps bolster the sound, and it has a morphable wave which moves between sine, square and saw. And we can even add pulse width modulation. So the pulse width modulation applies to both the square wave, and when we add pulse width to a saw, it becomes a super saw. Again, all the grains are morphable shapes. We've got an LFO tab with two LFOs, and these are morphable LFOs. So if you've seen these on most of the popular synths these days, so you can do skew and morph and all that kind of thing. The VCF tab has a pair of voltage control filters. You've got your usual low pass, high pass, band pass, and a couple of others. And these can all be programmed either directly or via the mod matrix. We've got an envelope generator, and we can have up to 4 defined envelopes which can be routed via the envelope generator. I'm trying to do this with my mouse. It's not so easy on an iPad, but yes, we can add and remove points from this. We can use this envelope length to specify how long the envelope wants to be. So you get the envelope roughly the right length, the right size proportionally, and you can extend the length of the envelope generator just using these buttons at the top here. We can also add loop points and ping pong between them. We have a mod matrix, which again I will come back to later, but this is a scrollable list. And the next thing we've got is a WaveCloud, which is very interesting. It allows us to morph between various points within the sample we have loaded. I'll come back to that later. And finally, an effects tab where we have 2 pages of effects, lots of things for you to play with there. Now, one of the unique features of WaveCloud is this new WaveGlide option, which is like a sequencer. We can specify a number of points within the original grain file, and we can choose how to morph between them. Now, each specific element has a hold time and a transition time, and we have a mode which specifies whether we want to either glide or fade to the next point. So this can be done over a number of seconds, or we can flick to beats and have it done over a number of beats. Now, this is a preset created by the fabulous David Collett, who's been helping me on this project, and let's hear how that sounds. So WaveCloud adds a unique feature to the Granular Synthesis engine, which allows us to morph from one place to another. Now we're going to take a look at another one of David's presets, but this time it's mainly using the glide feature. Now, another easy way to create movement within your grain file is to use something called orbits, and I'm going to explain how that works right now. Now, as you can see, we have a file loaded, and if I tap anywhere within the ruler area and drag, you'll hear that we get hearing audio from that location. So we can find a location of interest just by dragging on the ruler. Now, to turn on the orbit, just alter the orbit speed, and I'm going to then set this width, orbit width, to encompass the area of the file that I want to perform a pattern within. Now, as you can see there, the orbit mode is set to random, and it's just randomly moving that play cursor around at the speed we tell it within that selected area. Now, the orbit function works in beats, so it's great for syncing stuff, syncing patterns to the beat. The speed is generally the speed at which it completes a full cycle, and the width, as you can see, tells it how far to seek within that file. Now, currently we're on random mode, but we have many different modes we can select, and they all perform various patterns. So this one is just ping-ponging backward and forward between start and end point. So as you can see here, I've set the speed to be 16 beats, so it's going to do a full cycle of 16 beats. And if I set the width to 24 beats, then it's going to complete that full cycle of 24 beats in 16 beats, so it's kind of compressing that down a little bit. But it will perform a sweep in time to the host. Now, as you can see, there are a number of different orbit modes within the orbiter, and they are all unique and useful in their own rights. But it's probably the simplest way to mess around by importing samples and playing around with this, see what happens. It's important to note, however, that the WaveGlide always takes priority over the orbits. You can have both going on at the same time. The other important thing to note is that each note you play has its own unique orbit. So as I play more and more keys on my keyboard, you'll see that there's more and more nodes that are emitting grains as that orbit progresses. So here is another example. Now, I know many of you are preset guys and don't really touch synth programming, making your own presets. So it's such a fun thing to do on this program. I want to go over just how easy it is. So let's go up to the menu and select Init Patch and start off from scratch, and this will reset every setting within the interface. Now the first thing we want to do is get a grain file, and you can either do this by dragging and dropping a file from, say, the Files app directly into the editor, and if we drag our finger along the ruler up here, you can position the play cursor any way you like that sounds interesting. Now if we bring up the keyboard and press C3 on that keyboard, you will hear the sound. Now let's turn down the number of grains that are emitted per second. And then press C3, which is where the sample is originally assigned. Now you'll notice that the grain's not evenly emitted, and that's because this random setting here was set. So if we remove the randomness and set the grains emitted to 2, you'll hear 2 grains emitted per second, evenly spaced. But if I play without any randomness, it doesn't sound so good. Now if we add a little randomness to the proceedings, we don't hear the individual grains. Now if I reduce the number of grains emitted to 1 per second, we can listen to the length and how that affects everything. So because I've increased the length so drastically, you can hear more than just an individual snippet of vocal. We're hearing more of the original sound. Now to the right of the editor you'll see a play button, and if we long press that play button, you'll see that the play cursor returns to the beginning of the audio file. And if I hit the play button now, we can hear what we've actually imported. Now below the play button is a record button, and when I press that record button I get asked whether I want to make a mono or a stereo recording. Now if I press stereo, the editor will clear and you'll see the record light flashing until I actually start speaking, in which case it starts recording and then automatically stops when it hears silence. Now we can examine the file just by dragging our finger over the file and finding suitable locations for pinning to C3. Now if I long press on the record button, I get the recording options, and as you can see here it's on automatic start and stop, but you can change that if you wish. Now another sadly lacking feature in most of these granular apps is the ability to edit samples, and this third button down allows us to bring up this edit toolbar, which allows us to perform specific operations on a selected area of the file. So for instance, damn those notifications. We can remove or clear sections of a file, and we also have the ability to normalize a file, which is really important when you're doing sampling or you've got samples with low levels. We can also make selections and do fade in and fade outs, which is very useful. And of course, if you make any mistakes, we've got an undo feature with, I think, quite a number of undos available, so I could go all the way back to the original sample. Now, when you import samples or you purchase this app, you'll find that there are a number of samples available in this audio pool area, which are accessible just by clicking on that drop down menu. And you'll also notice that there's, unlike some of the other apps I've done before, there's now you can actually create folders in here to organize your files a little bit better. I provided a number of samples for you to play around with just to start off, but obviously if you drag and drop anything into the editor, it will appear inside this menu. And as we saw a little bit earlier in the video, we can turn on the orbit and use the orbit to do a glide across the sample. And you'll also find that there's a folder with a number of textures available. So if you want to start creating your own noises and stuff, you can. Let's just try and load one of these in. Again, click on the ruler to position the cursor centrally, and then enable the orbit mode, and let's just see what that sounds like. Okay, not so great at the minute. Now there is, when you load a sample, an option to tune that sample here. But I'm going to leave the tuning alone. I'm going to alter the knob next to it, which is a random tune. So every grain that's created is at a random tune, a random number of semitones away from the original. Now let's try increasing the spray. And very quickly we can get the effect of running water. Now I want to draw your attention to the grain file button. If we long press that, we get a floating window which is an audio pool manager, and inside here we can do all sorts of things like creating folders. We can drag and drop files from one folder to another, so it's great for organizing stuff. We can also, if I go into the samples folder, well, let's create a new file, in it a new patch, and I'm going to go into the samples folder, and I'm going to load a sample just by clicking on the sample and press load. Now I'm going to pick a second sample. I'm going to preview it by pressing again a second time on the sample, and I'm going to insert it at the cursor position. And the great thing here is you can append sample on sample and then use this. Of course, I've got a little bit of rubbish on the end here, so I can delete that, and use this as the basis of another patch. Of course, if you think about it, we could use the WaveCloud to morph between one sound and another. Now, one word of warning. You can import files, really large files, but it's not really a great idea to save a patch with a really large file. Although you can do it, I've got a whole song here, and I can go along in that song and find a nice part of that song which attaches to C3 and has the ability to be pitched by playing different notes, but we wouldn't want to save that. Just something else, you can actually zoom in and edit on pinpoint accuracy on this, It's a great tool. So let's save this as a preset and see what happens. So you can come into the preset manager, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a bank, and I'm just going to call it my bank, I think. And yeah, and now the first thing you want to do is actually create a group within that folder. So I'm just going to create a pads, and then we can hit the save button and give the song a name. Now don't forget, I said be careful when you come to saving presets. Use the editing functions and trim down as much as you can off the sample before you save. Otherwise, if you look at this, you're using excessive disk space. It works, but you know, it's advisable to trim the audio down. Otherwise, you end up with a preset of around 6 megabytes, which is not good. A typical preset would probably have about 10 seconds of sound. It's up to you really, but like as I demonstrated here, we can actually go up and save a preset of any size. Now we can also take presets now and drag and drop them between groups, which is a great feature when you've recorded a load of samples and you want to manipulate them and move them around and get them into categories. It's a great thing. And we still have the ability to take your whole bank and just simply drag and drop that bank into the file manager, and then obviously the file structure is retained, and we can drag that back and forward as we wish. If we long press on the file, we can compress it and then send back that bank on to somebody else. If you've created a nice set of presets, why not share them? And again, anyone familiar with my two previous synths will know that we can save favourites and create a favourites list. Although I've got nothing in my favourites at the minute, it's a good feature where we can have selected presets, and what we do is we can load a preset by clicking on it, but if we like it we can double tap it and it gets added to our favourites list. So it's a quick list, so you don't have to work your way through file structures. Now to the right of the grain file is an import button which allows you to import instead of dragging and dropping, and the last button on this toolbar is actually a limiter which you can turn on and off. If you long press the limiter button, you can then pick what you want to limit it to, -1 dB, -2 dB and so on. Now since we're 25 minutes into this video, I really should just make a note on the mod matrix, because this is what brings all these different features together. We haven't talked really about the LFO and the VCF, and we've barely touched on the envelope generator. The envelope generator FEG1 is by default assigned as similar to an ADSR. You can make adjustments here to control the attack, decay, sustain, release of your sound. So you create a curve which looks as you want, and then alter the length of that transition, so I can create smoother sweeps or add more release to my sound. But there are 3 other FEGs that can be used as well, and all these features can be manipulated by the mod matrix. Now the columns across the top are modulation sources, which include the FEGs, the LFOs and so on, and down the left hand side the actual individual rows contain things that we want to control. In this case we can just simply tap anywhere within this grid and drag left and right to add positive or negative values. We can double tap on any item to remove it. Now if you look, you can see that FEG1 is controlling both the oscillator output and the grain output, and pitch bend is assigned both to oscillator tune and grain tune. Now this is a default setting, and if ever we want to return to a default setting, we can press the default button on the left here. If we want to add velocity sensitivity to this, we can just press the velocity button, and you'll see the velocity column now has settings alongside the grain and oscillator output. Now I think this is just about it, but before anyone starts criticising my choice of colour schemes, which you might do, if you long press on the menu button at the top left, we have a number of colour schemes that you can choose, and each of them a little bit different, and it's up to you really. How you can even design your own. These are just a few examples. But you can set whatever colour scheme you like. I actually like that one, and you can also change the knob design. So if you don't really like the silver knobs, we can go back to the old white ones, or as David Collett likes, the black ones, and that works really nice with the blue theme. So yeah, the choice is yours. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're looking forward to the release, which is due within the next week or two. So for now, don't forget to thumb up the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.